Indonesia's decision to acquire 42 J-10C fighters from China marks a strategic inflection point in Southeast Asia's security environment. The deeper implications extend into the architecture of regional alliances, technological ecosystems, interoperability challenges, and the political positioning of both Indonesia and the Philippines within the broader Indo-Pacific defense framework. It is this internal, structural significance, far beyond the aircraft themselves, that shapes the trajectory of the Indonesia-Philippines military axis. Indonesia's Air Force has traditionally relied on a composite mix of platforms from multiple suppliers, including F-16s from the United States, Su-27 and Su-30 fighters from Russia, and more recently the planned procurement of Rafale fighters from France. The introduction of J-10C into this already hybrid fleet complicates the system of systems architecture that underpins Indonesia's operational capability. The J-10C is not merely a multi-role fighter, it is a node in a Chinese tactical ecosystem of sensors, data links, and engagement protocols optimized for integration with PLA-style command and control frameworks. Its AESA radar, advanced sensor fusion, and compatibility with beyond visual range missiles such as the PL-15 represent a performance leap, but one that is tightly integrated with Chinese defense electronics and software. The Philippines, in contrast, is deeply embedded in the Western technology environment. Its current frontline air platform, the FA-50PH, operates with Link 16 data link infrastructure, enabling real-time tactical connectivity with United States and allied aircraft, as well as access to U.S.-enabled maritime domain awareness networks. The Philippine Armed Forces are being systematically oriented toward doctrine and interoperability standards compatible with use in DOPACOM architecture. The island nation's defense modernization roadmap is aligned with Western sensor logic, Western data protocols, and U.S.-backed intelligence and training regimes. These two paths create a technological bifurcation inside ASEAN itself. One pillar, represented by the Philippines, is anchored into the U.S.-led data ecosystem. The other, represented increasingly by Indonesia, is a multi-vector procurement system that includes both Western and non-Western defense technologies, including Chinese systems. The practical result is not merely political complexity, it is tactical incompatibility. Even if Indonesian and Philippine fighters operated in the same airspace during joint patrols, the J-10C would not be able to share sensor data or target telemetry with FA-50 aircraft because China's tactical links and Link 16 are mutually isolated by design. In practice, this obstructs convergence of real-time shared situational awareness. This becomes even more consequential in a future contingency scenario. If the Philippines were involved in a maritime confrontation with China in the eastern portion of the South China Sea, Manila would expect or hope for regional alignment among Southeast Asian neighbors. Yet Indonesia's procurement of Chinese fighters could complicate the calculus. Jakarta is not a treaty ally of the United States, nor does it view China primarily as an active military adversary. Instead, Indonesia's strategic posture is rooted in maintaining maximal autonomy. This autonomy is reflected in defense procurement diversification, diplomatic balancing between Beijing and Washington, and refusal to be subsumed under any major power security umbrella. The Philippines' strategic logic, meanwhile, is based on alliance leverage. The Mutual Defense Treaty with the United States is the backbone of its external security guarantee. Its defense policy rests on the premise that alignment with an external superpower offsets its material disadvantages in force-on-force capability. Manila's approach is alliance locking, while Jakarta's is alignment avoidance. These two models can coexist peacefully, but they do not naturally converge into a single operational framework. It is worth stressing that Indonesia's purchase of J-10C fighters is not inherently anti-Philippines nor pro-China. It is pro-Indonesia. It reflects a sovereign procurement strategy intended to maximize bargaining power, diversify supply chains, and maintain freedom of operational planning independent of external influence. To view the move through a binary lens of choosing sides is misleading. Indonesia is choosing neither side. It is choosing flexibility. The deeper question is whether this procurement introduces a long-term technological divergence within ASEAN that could fragment future defense cooperation. If ASEAN defense cooperation remains at the level of military diplomacy, joint exercises, and high-level forums, the divergence is manageable. But if ASEAN were to pursue deeper tactical integration, such as shared sensor networks, synchronized patrols, or layered air defense coordination, Philippines-aligned Western technology and Indonesia-aligned hybrid technology become structurally incompatible. Looking toward 2030-2035, there are three possible strategic trajectories. The first is continued divergence, where Indonesia and the Philippines increasingly operate within separate geopolitical technology orbits. The second is gradual convergence, perhaps driven by a shared need for common data link standards or maritime surveillance cooperation, leading toward development of ASEAN-specific interoperability protocols. The third possibility is asymmetric convergence, where one side partially adapts toward the other. In theory, Indonesia could shift back toward Western systems if strategic friction with China increases. Alternatively, the Philippines could diversify inward rather than outward, seeking autonomy by gradually incorporating more non-U.S. systems into its arsenal. At present, however, Manila shows no sign of deviation from the U.S. line, whereas Indonesia continues to deepen multi-sourcing. Within the South China Sea, the implications are nuanced. The J-10C increases Indonesia's regional deterrence posture, strengthens air policing around Natuna waters, and reinforces Jakarta's capacity to enforce strategic ambiguity. At the same time, it underscores the difference between Indonesia's stance as a regional balancer versus the Philippines' stance as a regional claimant backed by an external patron. Should regional tensions escalate, the Philippines may discover that Indonesia's neutrality is not synonymous with alignment. Jakarta will protect Indonesian waters absolutely, but will likely not enter combat to defend Philippine claims. What remains, despite these differences, is the potential for cooperation at the maritime awareness level. Both nations have an interest in counter-illegal fishing, smuggling, piracy, and stabilization of sea lanes. A future Indonesian-Philippine security partnership may therefore concentrate more on shared domain awareness rather than direct operational integration. The evolution of this relationship will depend on political leadership, shared perceptions of threat, and willingness to overcome the technological disconnect between Chinese standard and NATO standard military systems. In essence, Indonesia's acquisition of the J-10C is a strategic declaration of independence rather than alignment. The Philippines must consider how its defense posture interacts with this evolving landscape. The two nations face similar challenges but respond to them in fundamentally different ways. Their capacity to find a shared operational language, whether technological or diplomatic, will shape the dynamics of Southeast Asian security in the decade ahead.